Welcome. I'm going to jump into this presentation on AI prompt engineering for university faculty. My name is Dr. Rick Upchurch. I'm going to hopefully give you some tools that will help you as you work with AI prompts to be able to get more out of the process and the responses than you would normally be able to. The objectives for this session will fall into three broad categories. Understanding the craft model for prompt engineering, exploring the key concepts in AI interactions, and then finally we'll do an application exercise at the very end to help you apply these concepts. So let's jump first of all into the craft framework for prompt engineering. CRAFT, C-R-A-F-T, an acronym. It stands for context, role, action, format, and tone. And you can see the broad framework for that. This acronym or this framework for prompt engineering is particularly effective in helping achieve the best possible results in your responses from your AI. I'm going to expand this a little bit further here and show you how this breaks down into application. So C-R-A-F-T, and I'm going to share this with you from my own personal experience. I've used and been working with AI prompt engineering pretty much from the very inception, from basically December of 2022. You know, ChatGPT was released in November of 2022, and I've been working with prompt engineering from the very outset. And this is the best framework that I've found that works, and it's very easy to use, and it's worth remembering. And I have committed to memory. I encourage you to do something very similar, because if you can provide this kind of information in your initial prompt, you will get better responses. That's just a fact. You will get better responses if you put these into this framework. So the context, and the context is what you are, why you are doing it. Think about the word why when you think context, and that'll really be helpful. Think about the why that you need this information. Why are you going to use it? So graduate student researching a project. Role, think about who you want the AI to be, or the perspective, if you want to use that word, that you want the AI to come from. So we've got the why and we've got the role. Now we're going to get to the what here. The what is what you want, the action that you want the AI to accomplish. In this case, it's analyze and summarize and do the analysis related to that. This is very important to be as specific as possible. The less specific you are, the more likely it is that the AI could jump to conclusions and potentially hallucinate. Now, I'm not going to talk a lot about hallucinations in this particular presentation. You all have heard about hallucinations, but generally hallucinations occur when the prompt isn't specific enough. So context, role, action, this is the what, and then the format tells me how I want it to come back, what I want it to look like. In this case, a detailed summary, but it can be anything. You decide the format. I want it to be in narrative form. I want it to be in bulleted format. I want it to be laid out like a professional presentation or proposal, or I need it to be laid out in a typical, and you choose the format. The format that you pick defines how the material is going to come back to you, or at least in general terms. And then the tone, C-R-A-F-T, the tone is really big, and this is one that's often missed. Students miss this all the time, but honestly, so do faculty. I want it to be academic yet accessible. I want it to be friendly. I want it to be compassionate yet assertive. Those are all tone statements. And all of those make a difference in the response you get back. Literally, you can try that. You can ask it for compassionate yet assertive, or collegial, or academic, or humorous, or from different tone, just the tone that you put in there. So those things give you that foundation piece to get your craft. So this is the framework, CRAFT: context, role, action, format, tone. Context, role, action, format, tone. If you think about this and apply this when you're creating your prompts, you will get a better response, guaranteed. And here it is in an example. And you can see I've color coded it so that the yellow is the C. And you read through that, and that aligns with what we just looked at in the last slide. C, and then the R is in the green there, a kind of a limeish green. C, R, I'm going to give you the role, and then here's my action in this teal colored blue. This is the action I want you to do. Please analyze and summarize. Focus on. Provide a detailed report. This is the what I want you to give me right there. And then the fuchsia there is the format. Be sure the report is structured with an introduction, a main body, and a conclusion. Now that seems obvious, but it's not obvious to the AI. It doesn't know what you want, and so it may give you a whole list of bullet points, or it may give you a paragraph. It literally won't know unless you do that. And this, of course, I'm asking it here to provide 3 scholarly sources. If I ask it to give me 3 scholarly sources, and I don't look up to make sure those 3 scholarly sources exist and are accurate, that's on me, because I would never turn in a document with 3 scholarly sources listed from an AI without checking to make sure they actually exist, because it's foolish to do that. And then the last one is the T, the tone. In this case, the tone should be academic, yet accessible, and aiming to inform. So there's your tone, CRAFT. Now, what I want to do is take a second here and ask you to apply this. So I want you to think about using the CRAFT model framework to design a prompt, or to put together a prompt to design a course syllabus for one of your courses. So C, context, what level is the course? Junior, sophomore, freshman, senior? What's the subject for the course? What's the format? Is the course going to be delivered online? Is it going to be delivered in the classroom? Is it going to be delivered in 50-minute segments, or is it going to be delivered in an hour-and-a-half segment? Those are context questions that, if you provide the AI, it will be better able to give you a response. And then the role. What role should the AI take? Is it a knowledgeable person in this, or do you want it to write it from the perspective of a student? So you define the role, and then you tell it the action you want. I want a course syllabus that includes, and then you put in all the things. I need course objectives. I need an outline broken out for X number of course sessions over X number of weeks. You design what you want, and you're very specific about that. And then your format, here's how I want it formatted back to me. I want it formatted as a course syllabus, using a typical syllabus format. And if you have a format already, you can actually attach that to the AI and tell it to use that format to generate your final document. And then the tone you want it to use, professional, or rather not professional, but professional or academic or whatever. So that's your exercise. I'm going to pause for a little bit. I want you to pause your screen and complete this exercise. All right. So hopefully you've done that. Hopefully you were pretty impressed with the results you've got. And we're going to look at some other concepts that are going to come up in just a second to talk about how you can actually refine that. Before we do that, however, I want to talk about this particular slides. One of the fundamental aspects of generative AI, or Gen AI, is that it is an inherently reactive rather than proactive. That's a really great distinction. That means that AI systems, including the ones that we interact with on a daily basis, are designed to respond to input, whether that input's a question, a prompt, or a data set. However, it doesn't initiate actions or create content on its own unless specifically prompted. It's not going to just out of the blue say, hey, here's a syllabus I thought you'd like to have. That's not going to happen. It's out there. I mean, you just created a prompt and you just went through an exercise to create a syllabus. But if you sit there and looked at your generative AI screen, maybe you're on Chat GPT or Claude or some other one, you just sit there and looked at it, and you've got this robot sitting in front of a blank screen. That's exactly what's happening. It's sitting in a blank screen. It doesn't know what to do. It doesn't have a clue what you want until you tell it what you want. It is inherently reactive, not proactive. That is a big, big deal. So while AI can assist in generating content by synthesizing existing information or offering creative suggestions based on patterns, it lacks the ability to innovate or generate truly novel ideas independently. It can only build on what it's been trained on, the data from the past. Now, this has significant implications for us in creative fields. While AI can help streamline tasks like drafting emails, outlining reports, or even generating creative ideas within set parameters, it's still the human element that drives genuine originality. AI won't take that proactive leap into unknown territory. It just won't. Instead, it's going to wait for a well-crafted prompt from a human user to react. And that means for true innovation, we still need human creativity to initiate those prompts, provide direction, and challenge the norms. And I hope that helps you think about that in a completely different context. Even when students are responding, it is how that is all put together that truly does influence whether that is perceived of as reactive or even plagiarism in a lot of ways. All right, so I'm going to go now into these key concepts. Now, I'm not going to elaborate them here, but these are the key concepts I'm going to touch on. Each one of these is important in its own way. I'm not going to spend a long time. This is a brief presentation, not an extensive presentation, but I am going to spend a little bit of time on each one of these that I hope will be helpful to you. Let's start with temperature. This setting, and I say setting like this. You see my fingers going there? This setting controls the randomness or creativity in AI responses. It's not really a setting as much as it is an interpretation of the language used in the prompt, because it's all about the prompt. A low temperature setting results in a very focused, straightforward, factual answer, very helpful for fact-based inquiries. For example, a low temperature response, as you can see on the screen there, list 5 classic novels taught in high school English classes. That's very low temperature, very factual, not a lot of room for creativity in that. It is what it is. But on the other hand, a high temperature introduces more creativity, like asking or generating 5 unique story ideas, blending sci-fi and historical fiction. Choosing the right temperature helps get the right kind of response. Now, temperature can be set in a couple of different ways. This setting can be influenced by a couple of different things. So one way to do the setting is to use specific words in your prompt that are automatically connected to the concept of temperature. So for instance, the word brainstorming is a much more high temperature setting than the word list. List something list like the one that's in the example there, list 5 classic novels that are being taught. So we're not asking it with the word brainstorming. We want it to brainstorm. That means generally in our minds to be creative. That's a creative word. More specific terminology will result in much lower temperature responses. So one way to do temperature is to introduce terminology that requires that not requires, but is perceived by the AI to be either wanting more creativity or less creativity. So that's one way. Another way that fits into this really well is to by specifically using terms, the terms low and high temperature. So I'm going to give you an example here. On the left, describe a sunset view over the mountains using a low temperature response. And I typed that exact prompt. I typed that exact prompt into an AI, and that's what I got. Now, that's pretty good, isn't it? I look at that and I can see that it gives me that sense, and that's not I mean it's creative, but it is kind of low temperature. It doesn't really push the boundaries of creativity. It's a much more kind of factual experience, even though it's very warm and nice. But then on the right, I used a completely different prompt. Well, no, I didn't. I used the same prompt with one word difference. See that? Instead of using low temperature response, I used high temperature response. And now all of a sudden, I've got a completely different explanation of or description of a sunset over the mountains just by asking this. So you now have an awareness that probably maybe even as much as 90% of the people who use AIs on a daily basis may have kind of had an impression that something was going on, but now you know exactly what's going on. You know what's going on in this particular sense. So in this sense, it's a very good thing for you. You have a better awareness now of temperature, and you can influence temperature in a way that you've never been able to before because you're aware of it. The next one has to do with multi-step prompts. Now, multi-step prompts are really bread and butter for ANI in a lot of ways because, for instance, the example I had you do earlier about creating a syllabus. I have an entire document with about I don't know 7, 8 prompts that build off of each other that are multi-stage prompts, literally for the purpose of building syllabi. And because of those prompts, I have the ability to build a reasonable syllabus for any course. I would want to vet it with a subject matter expert, but I could build a syllabus framework for any course within an hour of working with an AI just by using this multi-step process. Now here's an example on the screen. Generate thesis statements and then pick a statement, outline the key arguments for that statement, and then list relevant sources. All of that's possible there. Those are multi-step response. This is particularly useful in complex projects like building a syllabus or developing lesson plans. But it really does help. And because you're engaging in a chat, these prompts that you've put in build off of each other and refer back to information in the earlier part of that chat. It's really, really cool. I've used this and actually incorporated templates, attached templates to the chat, and then ask it to fill out various pieces and documents of the requirement as I've gone along the way. Because you can do that so easily and it will help you build that in a very powerful way. And it saves a tremendous amount of time and allows you to be not a true subject matter expert, but it allows you to get things up to a place where a subject matter expert would have very little work to do to tweak it into a reasonable format. And now I want to talk about bias. Bias is a crucial issue in AI usage. Um, AI is trained on vast data sets, no question about that. And it sometimes, a lot of times, reflects those societal biases that is embedded in the data, whether they relate to gender, race, politics, etc. We have to be aware of this and actively work to mitigate against this. Now, let me share this with you. Bias should always be considered to exist in a response. It may not always be recognized in a response. For instance, describe a sunset over the mountains. Well, there's not a lot of bias in that for gender, race, politics, or other. And so, even though it may exist, it crosses the boundaries of all of those things. And so it becomes a much more kind of a holistic kind of thing. But it still always exists. The normal biases that are prevalent from the training are those from, and you want to make a note of this, I did not put it on the screen, white, male, middle income or higher, politically liberal individuals from the Western Hemisphere. Yes, the normal biases prevalent are those from white, male, middle income or higher, politically liberal individuals from the Western Hemisphere, America. Now, it doesn't make much difference if you're asking about sunsets. However, it may make a great deal of difference if you're asking about anything else, even up to and possibly including building a syllabus. And here's the thing that you have to think about. It's not maybe something you want to think about, may not be something you're happy about. But if you are white, male, middle income or higher, politically liberal, and from the Western Hemisphere, you're not going to probably even recognize the bias because it's going to line up with what you already think. Shockaroo. That means we have to be self-aware enough, self-aware enough to understand and see that there is bias available. Now, how do you mitigate against bias? Well, pretty simple process, really. There are two things you can do. You can ask AI to examine its responses for bias. You can be specific. You can examine biases, examine this response for bias, gender bias, or racial bias, or political bias, or et cetera, et cetera. You can also ask it to provide responses from different perspectives. So you can say, okay, now you've given me this response. Now assume a different role. Remember craft, C-R-A-F-T? Assume the role of, and give it a different role. And in your different role, it will give you a different perspective that you can then use to compare the two responses to see where and if bias has negatively affected what you are trying to do. So bias always exists. It always exists from, at this stage of the game anyway, certain fundamentals, and there is a way to mitigate against it if you are self-aware enough to understand that you might be biased. And you are, obviously we all are. But if you are self-aware enough to understand that and then ask it to mitigate against it, it can do that. And then finally, I want to talk about iterative refinement. So iteration means obviously this iteration and then the next one and the next one. So it's a stepping process. The goal is to keep moving and improving the AI response. For instance, you might start with a basic question like explain photosynthesis, and then you review the response and you want to take it further. In a lot of cases, iteration, it can happen two ways. You can start like this, like on the screen there, which means that you didn't put together a very good prompt to begin with. You put together a very quickie. You put together a quickie prompt, explain photosynthesis. If you'd used craft, even though it might have taken you a little bit longer, you probably wouldn't have had to iterate as many times to get the information you really look for. But still in all, iteration is really the bread and butter of what happens with that. In fact, if you're not iterating your AI prompts and working with AI, then you are not developing your document to the level that it could be. Because it's all about fine-tuning the output. And the most common iterations, and there's 3 of them on the screen there, summarize, clarify, expand, but anything that comes back to and hits on the CRAFT model is an iteration thing that you can use. But you can also ask it to use X tone or format X, simply like we connected back to CRAFT. It's the most important concept to master and use in dealing with AI responses. And even with the iterations, taking that final response and adjusting it because of your own personal knowledge, background, experience, gestalt, however you want to say, because of who you are, adjusting it differentiates a response that was generated from an AI to a response that resonates with a real person and makes it real. And so iterative refinement, I can't say enough about how to use that and the importance of that. So we've done all that, and we've talked about, then we've come to these 4 concepts. All of these concepts are important. All of them affect the AI prompt engineering process. And hopefully you've learned something through all of these. Now, I'm going to take just a last exercise here. And here's the exercise. Design a lesson plan. That's a lesson plan for a class session using AI assistance. So use CRAFT for the initial prompt, and then apply one other concept. Adjust the temperature. Or now that you've given me this, give me this. And now that I've got this, now build off of that and give me this. Or can you examine what you gave me in relationship to bias? Because I have X number of minority students in my classroom, or X number of gender in my classroom, one way or the other. Would that affect, or should that affect, or how does that affect the responses that you've already given me? Or iterative refinement. And so use that. And I'm going to pause here real briefly for you to take advantage of using that to design a lesson plan. All right. Hopefully you've done that and you've had a good experience with that. And you've seen the benefit then of not only using CRAFT, craft, for your initial prompt, but also how one of these other particular concepts like temperature, multi-step, bias awareness, or iterative refinement can really enhance the process. And then finally, we're down here to takeaways. This is nearly the last of the presentation. You can see here craft provides structure for prompt engineering, and then your basic concepts, and then practice and experimentation. I think this has hopefully been a useful experience for you as we work through this presentation. And I just want to leave you with this slide here. And you can pause this at any point in time if you need to. I'm going to move this up here out of the way so that you can see that. Maybe you want to screen capture that with your phone. Maybe you want to just write down some of those URLs. You can always pause the screen here and capture some of those. These are some articles that talk about prompt engineering from various different sources that I hope will give you some information to be able to write better prompts. Boy, embrace the prompt. It's all about the prompt, but if you use the prompt correctly, it can really make a big difference. Hope you found this all useful to you. God bless. Thank you for watching.